My mom demanded my inheritance with fake lawyers and threats. When that failed, she broke in and tried to burn my house down. I caught her on camera and made sure she'd never come near me again. The door opened, and I never expected to be here, sitting across from my own mother and the rest of my so-called family, watching them try to steal what was rightfully mine. But here I was. Let me take you back a bit. My dad was the only real parent I had growing up. He wasn't perfect, but he worked hard, took care of me, and most of all, he was fair. My mom, on the other hand, she was selfish, manipulative, and always played the victim. They divorced when I was 12, and honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened to him. I remember the day he told me they were splitting up. We were sitting on the back porch, the summer heat making the wooden steps warm beneath us. Dad had his hands clasped between his knees, eyes fixed on the ground. "Son," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "your mom and I were not going to be living together anymore." I wasn't surprised. For months I'd heard them arguing late at night when they thought I was asleep. The shouting, the slamming doors, the cold silence that followed at breakfast the next morning. I'd seen my dad sleeping on the couch more nights than not. "Is it because of the money?" I asked. Even at 12, I knew that was a big part of their problems. Mom always wanted more than what we had, more than what Dad could provide with his contractor's salary. Dad looked at me surprised. "You've been paying attention, huh?" He sighed, placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's more complicated than that. But yes, that's part of it. Your mom and I, we want different things from life." What he didn't say, but what I would come to understand years later, was that what Mom wanted was someone who could give her the lifestyle she felt entitled to. Dad was a hard worker, honest to a fault, but he wasn't going to make millions building houses. And that wasn't enough for her. The divorce hit Dad hard financially and emotionally. Mom took him for everything she could, demanding alimony that stretched his budget thin. But he never complained. Not to me. He worked overtime, took on extra jobs, made sure I never felt the pinch. And when I stayed with him on weekends, he was present in a way he couldn't always be when they were together. We worked on projects in his garage, went fishing at the lake, or just sat watching basketball games, comfortable in each other's silence. At Mom's house, it was different. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, she'd already met Richard, a real estate developer with money to burn. Suddenly, she lived in a house 3 times the size of our old one, drove a luxury car, and took vacations to places Dad and I could only see on TV. My half-siblings came along a few years later. First Emily, then Tyler, and they became the center of Mom's universe. Perfect children for her perfect new life. I watched as Mom transformed herself to fit Richard's world. Her hair got blonder, her clothes more expensive, her laugh higher and more affected. She encouraged me to call Richard Dad and looked disappointed when I refused. Around him and his friends, she acted like her life began when they met, as if the 15 years she spent with my father were just an unfortunate detour. "Honey," she'd say when I brought up a memory from before, "that was a different time. We've moved on." But Dad never asked me to forget her or to choose sides. "She's still your mother," he'd say whenever I complained about her. "You can be angry with her. That's your right, but don't let that anger eat you up." That was Dad all over. Always thinking about what was best for me, even when it meant being gracious to someone who had hurt him deeply. When Dad passed away last year, it was a sudden heart attack. No warning. One day we were talking about finally going on that fishing trip to Canada, and the next I was picking out his casket. It wrecked me. But what came after that was almost worse. His will was clear. Everything was left to me, the house, the savings, the investments, everything. He had made sure of it because he knew what my mom was like. He even told me once, "She'll come after it. Son, be ready." I thought I was, but I underestimated just how low she would go. Not even a week after the funeral, she started calling. At first, it was the fake concern. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" Then it turned into guilt tripping. "You know, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have had the life your father gave you." And finally, straight up demands. "You need to do the right thing and split it with your family." By family, she meant herself, her husband, who she married 2 years after leaving Dad, and their 2 golden children, my half-siblings. People who barely spoke to my dad. People who never lifted a finger to help him even when he was in the hospital. I told her no over and over. That's when things got ugly. She started showing up at my house unannounced, banging on the door. I remember one evening particularly well. I had just gotten home from work bone-tired after a 10-hour shift. All I wanted was a shower and some peace. Instead, I found my mother standing on my front step, her Mercedes parked in my driveway blocking my car. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me before I could stop her. She was wearing one of her designer outfits, something cashmere and cream-colored that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were hard and calculating. "Mom, I'm tired. Can we do this another time?" She ignored me, pacing my small living room like a caged animal. "This has gone on long enough, don't you think? It's been 3 weeks since the funeral. Time to be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I echoed, feeling my temper rise. "Like you were reasonable during the divorce, taking everything you could from Dad." Her face hardened. "That's ancient history. This is about what's fair. Fair would have been you and your perfect new family visiting Dad in the hospital when he had his first heart scare last year. Fair would have been returning his calls on his birthday. Fair would have been showing him an ounce of respect after everything he did for you." She flinched just slightly, then recovered. "Your father made his choices and I made mine. That's water under the bridge. But this inheritance that affects all of us." "No," I said firmly. "It affects me. Dad left it to me because he wanted me to have it. End of story." Her expression changed, then softened into something that might have looked like genuine concern to someone who didn't know her. "Honey, I'm worried about you. All that money all at once. It's a lot of responsibility. You're young. You could make mistakes." I almost laughed. "I'm 32, Mom. Not exactly a kid." "You'll always be my baby," she said, reaching out to touch my cheek. I stepped back, and something flashed in her eyes. Anger, frustration. I couldn't tell. "Think about what your father would want. He'd want you to share with your siblings." "No, he wouldn't," I said flatly. "He would want exactly what he put in his will. For me to have what he worked for, what he saved for what he planned for." Her face went cold then, all pretense gone. "You always were stubborn, just like him. Fine. Do what you want, but remember, family is forever. You're choosing money over blood right now." "That's rich coming from you," I replied, walking to the door and holding it open. "Wasn't that exactly what you did when you left?" She stormed out without another word, but I knew it wasn't over. My mother never gave up easily, especially when money was involved. When I stopped answering her calls, she had my half-sister leave long, dramatic voicemails about how I was tearing this family apart. Then came the threats. She claimed she would contest the will, that she would drag this through the courts for years. I held my ground. Then out of nowhere, I got an invitation to a family meeting. That should have been my first red flag. My family never meant for anything unless it was to cause drama. But something about it felt different. The wording was off too formal. I almost didn't go, but then something in my gut told me I needed to see what they were up to. The invitation came on thick cream stationery, the kind you'd use for a wedding announcement. "The Hanson family requests your presence for an important family discussion." It read, followed by a date, time, and my mother's address. At the bottom, in smaller print, regarding the estate of William Jensen, using my father's full name like that so impersonal made my blood boil. To them, he wasn't a person. He was an estate, a collection of assets they felt entitled to. I called my best friend Mike that night. We'd been close since college, and he'd been a rock through Dad's death and everything after. "They're planning something," I told him, pacing my apartment. "I can feel it." "So don't go," Mike said simply. "You don't owe them anything. But if I don't show up, I'll never know what they're trying to pull." Mike was quiet for a moment. "Then go, but be prepared and maybe bring back up." That got me thinking. Dad had always trusted his lawyer, a straight-talking woman named Patricia Ramirez, who'd helped him set up his will and handled his business affairs for years. I'd met with her after Dad died, and she'd been clear about everything. The will was solid. My mother had no claims. All the paperwork was in order. I called Patricia the next morning and explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, then said, "This sounds like an ambush. If you're going, I'm coming with you, but don't say anything about me beforehand." "You think they're that serious?" I asked, surprised by her immediate offer to help. "Your father was very clear about his wishes," she replied. "He also warned me about your mother. Said she'd try something like this if he died first. I promised him I'd make sure his will was respected." The day of the meeting, I felt sick to my stomach. Patricia and I agreed to arrive separately. Me, right on time, her a few minutes later once the meeting had started. As I drove to my mother's house, memories flooded back. The few awkward holidays I'd spent there as a teenager, the way Richard would talk down to Dad when they had to interact for school events, the constant comparisons between me and my half-siblings. I parked on the street rather than in the driveway, giving myself an easy exit. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the house I'd never felt welcome in and rang the doorbell. When I walked into my mom's house that day, I knew immediately that I had walked into an ambush. The living room had been set up like some kind of courtroom. My mom sat in the center next to her husband, smug as ever. My half-siblings were there too, looking way too pleased with themselves. And then there were the two men in suits. Lawyers I didn't even get a hello. One of the lawyers stood up and said, "We're here to discuss the proper distribution of your father's assets." I almost left. Proper distribution? He handed me a thick stack of papers. This is a revised agreement. It outlines a fair division of the inheritance among all immediate family members. I flipped through it. They wanted me to sign over 75% of everything, the house, the savings, even my dad's car. I looked up at my mom. "You have got to be kidding me." She sighed dramatically like I was some disobedient child. "This is the best solution for everyone. You don't need all of it. Be reasonable." Meso. Reasonable. They wanted to take everything my father worked for, everything he left for me, and they thought I would just roll over and let them. I took a deep breath and smiled. "Funny?" I said, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. "I brought someone too." The door swung open, and in walked my lawyer. But not just any lawyer, my father's lawyer. The one who drafted his will. The one who knew every single legal safeguard my dad put in place to prevent exactly this from happening. My mom's face went pale. Her husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My lawyer didn't waste any time. She picked up their so-called agreement and flipped through it. Then, without looking up, she said, "This is cute. Illegal, but cute." One of the other lawyers cleared his throat. "We believe that given the circumstances, a redistribution—" My lawyer cut him off. "Let me stop you right there. The will is ironclad. Any attempt to contest it will be laughed out of court. And if you so much as try to coerce my client into signing away his inheritance, we will press charges for fraud and attempted extortion." Dead silence. Then my mom's voice, sharp and desperate. "You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take your own mother to court." I looked her dead in the eye. "Try me." The room was silent. No one dared to move. My mom, who always had something to say, just stared at me like she didn't recognize the person in front of her. My half-sister, usually full of fake sympathy, suddenly looked like she wanted to sink into the couch. My stepdad, he was gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles had gone white. Then the lawyer sitting next to my mom cleared his throat. "There's no need for hostility. We're just trying to come to a mutual agreement." Mutual agreement, my ass. I folded my arms and leaned back in my chair. A mutual agreement would have been talking to me before you had a lawyer draft up a document that steals what's mine. My lawyer flipped the contract shut and dropped it onto the table. "This document wouldn't hold up in court for 2 seconds, and if you think my client is signing anything today, you're out of your minds." My mom exhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous." I turned to her. "No. What's ridiculous is you trying to manipulate me into handing over everything my dad left me." Her voice turned sharp. "He didn't leave it to you because he loved you more. He just didn't think things through. You don't need all of it. Your siblings deserve their fair share." I clenched my jaw. My siblings? You mean the two people who barely even acknowledged Dad existed? The ones who never visited him in the hospital, never called him on his birthday, never lifted a finger when he was sick? They don't deserve a damn thing. My half-brother, who had been sitting quietly in the corner this whole time, suddenly snapped, "That's not fair. We weren't close to him because he never tried with us. He always favored you." I turned to face him. "You mean the man you called a washed-up loser the last time he asked you to come over for Christmas?" "That man—" He turned red but said nothing. Then my stepdad, who had been silent up until now, leaned forward. "Listen, son." I cut him off. "Don't call me that. His face darkened, but he forced a fake smile. All right, look. We can all sit here and argue, or we can find a way to make this work for everyone. My lawyer smirked. Oh, we have found a way to make this work. It's called following the will. Then my lawyer reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. She slid it across the table toward my mom's lawyer. That contains a full legal breakdown of the will, copies of my client's rights, and a cease and desist order. If you or your clients continue harassing my client for money, we will pursue legal action. My mom's lawyer flipped through the pages, his face growing more serious by the second. That's when my mom snapped. She stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. You would do this to your own family. I looked up at her. You stopped being my family the moment you tried to steal from me. Her hands curled into fists. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? I just stared at her. And then she did something that made my blood run cold. She smiled. Not a normal smile, a calculated one. She sat back down, smoothed out her blouse, and sighed. All right, fine. She gestured at her lawyer. We won't fight it. That was too easy. Way too easy. My lawyer must have sensed it too because she narrowed her eyes. Good. Then we'll be taking our leave. We gathered our things and walked to the door. But just as I stepped out, my mom called after me. Take care of that house, sweetheart. I paused, turned back. Her smile was still there. You never know when accidents can happen. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't say anything, just walked out. But as I drove home, her words echoed in my head. Something wasn't right, and I was about to find out just how far my mother was willing to go. In the car, Patricia looked over at me, concern etched on her face. That was a threat, she said bluntly. You heard it too, right? I nodded, my hands tight on the steering wheel. She's never been one to lose gracefully. Document everything from now on, Patricia advised. Any calls, texts, emails, save them all. If she shows up at your place, record it. If anything happens to the house or your property, report it immediately. You think she'd actually do something? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Patricia's expression was grim. Your father thought so. That's why he made sure the will was airtight. He was protecting you even after he was gone. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by Dad's papers, insurance policies, bank statements, property deeds. Everything was in order just as he'd left it. I found myself looking at a photo of us from my college graduation. Dad standing tall and proud in his best suit, arm around my shoulders, beaming at the camera. Mom hadn't bothered to show up that day, claiming Emily had a dance recital she couldn't miss. I'll make you proud, Dad, I whispered to the photo. I won't let them take what you built. I barely slept that night. My mom's words kept replaying in my head. Take care of that house, sweetheart. You never know when accidents can happen. It wasn't just a comment, it was a threat. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just being dramatic, trying to scare me into second-guessing my decision, but something in her eyes told me otherwise. The next morning I went to check on the house. I hadn't moved in yet. Too many memories, but I planned to eventually. It was still my dad's place, and the thought of someone else living there felt wrong. I pulled into the driveway and immediately felt my stomach drop. The front door was wide open. I knew for a fact I had locked it. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The house had been trashed. Couch cushions slashed open, drawers pulled out and dumped onto the floor. My dad's framed photo shattered. And in the middle of the living room, written in red spray paint across the wall, was one word: thief. I clenched my fists. I didn't even have to guess who was behind this. I pulled out my phone and called the cops. While waiting, I checked the rest of the house. The damage was bad, but nothing seemed stolen. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Walking through the wreckage of Dad's home felt like a second loss. Every broken picture frame, every slashed cushion, every upended drawer was a violation. In his bedroom, I found the closet ransacked, his clothes thrown on the floor, some of them cut to pieces. His toolbox in the garage had been emptied, hammers and screwdrivers scattered across the concrete. Even the garden shed hadn't escaped. Bags of soil had been ripped open, plant pots smashed. But it was the kitchen that hit me hardest. The old oak table where we'd eaten countless meals together lay on its side, one leg broken off, and the refrigerator door stood open. The family photos and notes that had been held by magnets now torn to confetti on the linoleum floor. I knelt down picking up the fragments and found a piece of a photo from my high school graduation. Just Dad's smile in one eye, the rest of it gone. That's when I felt the tears come hot and sudden. I wasn't just crying for the damage. I was crying for the hatred behind it. The pure spite that would drive someone to destroy not just things, but memories. When the police arrived, I told them everything: the threats, the inheritance battle, the so-called family meeting. The officers took notes, asked a few questions, but I could tell they weren't going to do much. "Without security footage or witnesses, it's hard to prove who did this," one of them said. I almost laughed, like I didn't know exactly who was responsible. I filed the report anyway. If nothing else, I wanted it on record. Then I did something I knew my mom and her little army of thieves wouldn't expect. I installed cameras, and not just a couple of cheap ones. I went all in. High-definition night vision, motion-activated cameras covering every possible entrance. The front door, the back door, the garage, even the hallway inside. Then I waited. Sure enough, they couldn't help themselves. After the break-in, I couldn't bring myself to leave the house vulnerable. I called in sick to work and spent 3 days cleaning up the mess, repairing what I could, and installing the security system. Mike came over to help, bringing tools and takeout, not asking questions when I fell silent for long stretches. "You should press charges," he said as we repainted the wall where "thief" had been sprayed. "With what proof?" I replied. "The cops already said they can't do anything." "Then move," he suggested. "Sell this place, take the money, and go somewhere they can't find you." I shook my head. That's exactly what they want, for me to give up, to run away. I dipped my roller in paint with more force than necessary. This was Dad's house. He loved it here. I'm not letting them win. Mike looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then, we fight, but smart." That night after Mike left, I sat on the newly repaired porch steps looking out at the quiet street. Dad and I used to sit here on summer evenings drinking beer and talking about everything and nothing. This house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was a testament to his life, his work, his love. I wasn't about to let it go. The next day I called Patricia again and updated her on what had happened. She wasn't surprised, but was clearly alarmed. "This is escalating," she said gravely. "Have you considered a restraining order?" "Would that even work?" I asked. "They just deny they were here." "Maybe not yet," she conceded, "but it creates a paper trail. And if they try anything else," when I corrected her. "Not if. When." 4 nights later at 2:37 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. "Motion detected, backyard." I bolted upright in bed, grabbed my phone, and opened the live feed, and there she was, my mother dressed in all black, creeping around my dad's house with a flashlight. But she wasn't alone. Her husband was with her, carrying what looked like a canister of gasoline. I felt my blood turn to ice. I hit record on the camera feed and called 911. "911, what's your emergency?" "My mother and her husband are trying to burn down my house." The dispatcher asked for details, but I barely heard her. I was too busy watching in shock as my own mother handed her husband a lighter. Then the siren started. They must have heard them too, because suddenly they panicked. My mom yanked the canister from his hands, and they both took off running toward the street, but it was too late. The cops got there before they could escape. I watched through the camera as my mom screamed at the officers, trying to spin some story about how they were just checking on the property, but the gasoline in her hand said otherwise. And when the officers checked the canister, confirming it was full of fuel, that was it. They were arrested on the spot. I drove straight there, arriving just as they were being shoved into the back of the squad car. My mom saw me and started screaming. "You set me up! You did this to me!" I stared at her, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. "No, Mom," I said, my voice calm. "You did this to yourself." She lunged forward, but the cops held her back. That was the last time I saw her face to face. But the story wasn't over, because what happened next? That was the real twist. The cops took my mother and her husband to jail that night. I stood there in the cold, watching as the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the pavement. My hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from anger. They had planned to burn my house down. My dad's house. And for what? Spite, revenge, or just plain greed? Whatever the reason, I was done. Done giving them chances. Done hoping they do the right thing. Done letting them walk all over me like I was still some dumb kid. This time, they were going to face real consequences. The fallout the next few days were a blur of police reports, lawyer meetings, and court documents. My mother was charged with attempted arson and conspiracy to commit a felony. Her husband got hit with the same. And because my security cameras had caught everything in high definition, their lawyers didn't have much to work with. The best part, since she was already on thin ice with debt collectors and had a history of financial trouble, the judge denied her bail. She had to sit in jail until her trial. My half-siblings, the two entitled brats who thought they deserved a cut of my inheritance, tried to distance themselves. My half-sister left me a long, tearful voicemail about how she had no idea Mom was going to do something so crazy and that she hoped we could still be family. I didn't respond. My half-brother, the one who called my dad a washed-up loser, sent a short text. "Hey man, I didn't know about this. Hope you okay." I left him on read. They might not have been part of the arson attempt, but they sure as hell knew what my mom was capable of. They were more than happy to help pressure me into giving up my inheritance, but the second things got real, they ran. Not my problem. The trial, it took about 6 months for the case to go to court. My mother tried everything to get out of it. She claimed she had no idea there was gasoline in the canister, that she was just checking on the house because she was worried about me. Then she switched tactics, claimed I set her up, that I had lured her there and planted evidence to make it look like arson. That theory fell apart when the prosecutor played the security footage for the jury. There she was, plain as day, holding a flashlight pointing where her husband should pour the gasoline. There he was pulling a lighter from his pocket. The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her husband got 12 since he was the one actually holding the lighter. They both tried to appeal. They lost. Justice served. With him gone, I finally had peace. No more threats, no more late-night calls, no more stress. I kept the house fixed up, the damage, replaced the broken photos of my dad. I even framed a copy of the cease and desist order my lawyer sent them, just as a reminder of how far they went and how much they lost. As for my half-siblings, I never spoke to them again. Last I heard, my half-sister was drowning in credit card debt, and my half-brother was bouncing between jobs, still blaming everyone else for his problems. Not my concern. They made their choices just like my mother did, and in the end, they all got exactly what they deserved. After everything settled, I finally moved into Dad's house. Our house now. It felt right continuing what he started. Every morning I have coffee on the porch where we used to sit. Every evening, I work in his garage finishing projects he never got to complete. It's not the life I expected, but it's the one I'm building. Brick by brick, memory by memory. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Mom had just been decent. If she'd respected Dad's wishes, if she'd acted like family instead of a vulture circling his legacy. But then I remembered what Dad always said. You can't control what others do, son, only how you respond. I like to think I responded the way he would have wanted. Standing my ground, protecting what he built, and most importantly, not letting bitterness consume me the way it consumed her. Patricia still checks in now and then. Your father would be proud, Wishalas, she told me the last time we spoke. I think she's right. As for the inheritance, I've invested most of it just like Dad would have. Some went to charity causes he believed in. The rest is for the future. Maybe a family of my own someday. A family built on love and respect, not greed and entitlement. That's the real legacy Dad left me. Not the money or the house, but the example of how to live with integrity even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And that's worth more than anything my mother ever tried to steal.